Welcome to Ecosystem Unfiltered, podcast from Accelerant with me, TJ Alanalua, Head of Strategic Partnerships at Accelerant. Here, we cut through the noise with candid conversations from across the specialty insurance world. Real talk, real challenges, real ideas that help great businesses grow. Whether you're part of the Accelerant ecosystem or tuning in from outside it, we're glad you're here. Let's get into it. All right, cool. Here we are. Another episode of Ecosystem Unfiltered. I think this is our second official one. Today, we have an exciting topic to bring you guys. We're going to be talking about what it takes to build and scale in 2026 and beyond. And I'm fortunate and honored to have two great guests on today, Joanne and Amanda, who are both kind of intimately involved in building and scaling insurance. And I think we're going to be able to hit a lot of exciting topics and interesting topics for you guys today. So firstly, maybe you want to start with intros of yourselves. Maybe Joanne, you go first, and then Amanda.
Sure. I'm Joanne Artisani. I lead a company called Spoutr. Spoutr is a program and product design and build firm. We do the unsexy things about insurance that's required. We find them very exciting, but we author rates, rules, forms, underwriting guidelines, market submission materials, and the support. And frankly, think about Spoutr as everyone you would find at a carrier that you would go to ask the question that you're afraid to ask. We're who you ask that question to. So we're the non-carrier back office folks that provide you with all that good content needed to be confident in your growth.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Amanda Kai. I'm the founder and CEO of Jove Insurance. Jove is a global insurtech providing borderless insurance for businesses, contractors across 32 countries, including the US, UK, and also 30 countries in Europe. We make the business liability insurance borderless, meaning that we are able to provide the instantly through our digital quote and buy system insurance policy that is actually covering workforce when you're working with clients globally. It actually covers over 250 occupation, and we also then provide this to insurance brokers to provide you a digital quote and buy system that is a Shopify interface actually for brokers. So we're here to make the process much more digital, much modern, but ultimately making the conversion rate a lot higher for both the brokers and customers.
Awesome. And so we started with the title of what it takes to build and scale in 2026. One of the first maybe topics I want to dive down is, and I know we bantered about it in some of our pre-calls, but from your different seats, I mean, there's, to start and scale an MGA, you have to think about product, you have to think about technology, you have to think about distribution. Just want to riff on sort of, which one of those maybe gives you the most heartache, or which one do you feel like is the crux of getting scaling an MGA in 2026? Either of you can jump in on that, but maybe we start there.
I'll maybe start, and I know, Amanda, you'll have a lot from your own experience, what you're seeing to add to this. From the seat that I sit in, the distribution problem must be solved first and be thought about critically, how you're going to get the business in and how it's going to come in, where it's going to come from. What does plan B look like if plan A doesn't work? And you'll find the happy surprise anyway. The product itself, the insurance product, the relationship between the product and the distribution source is important. But from an advice perspective, the product follows the strategy. The product is it's the how things get done rather than the what. And I don't want to dismiss that it's not that it's not important or not the most important part, but it is always a response to the problem that is being solved. So from a scaling perspective, we have such an interesting opportunity right now with AI in the incredible power of what the technology is providing us across all fronts, really being thoughtful around how you can use AI and the emerging technologies as a tool to help grow and scale, and where does that show up in your business, whether it's product development. There are certainly efficiencies to be had there, but from a distribution, what can you do at a scale with that technology? I'm particularly excited about watching and having conversations with our MGAs that come to us and listening to how they're thinking about it and actively pulling that into the build strategy and how it shows up in underwriting and product and their distribution. It's this conversation that's very interconnected. And I'm very interested in Amanda's perspective from being in the market, like directly right now, having to navigate this.
I agree with Joanne on the side of the distribution is extremely important. And also, I think that being able to find a market or a market gap that your product will be able to fill, that is essentially what we find is, right? So we started our journey as a, because my own background, I sold my first company, which is a talent marketplace, to a large recruitment company. And at the time, we find that there are a lot of the contractors who are being placed for jobs and placements. However, they can be span across 30, 40 different countries. And there's not really an insurance product that being able to provide the right insurance cover for all these candidates across borders. So I think that's actually a really pain point that we find, and then we want to solve the problem. So I do think that the product always needs to actually fit in of what are the problem that we're solving. And ultimately that also converts into the distribution, because ultimately the distribution is from this tool that you actually built to solve this problem. And then there's a bit of interrelationship between what are the products that you want to build versus what are there actually available in the market. Are they actually available today? And if they are not available, how are you going to pitch to the insurer? How are you to actually build that from both underwriting? Why this is not available, right? Is it because of it's not possible to price the risk, or is it actually just because no one have thought about it that way? So obviously, if it's the latter, we can really thinking about how can we actually use the tool to be able to build a much better and more suitable product for this segment of the customer. And I think this is how we started. So we saw a lot of these workers, some businesses being servicing clients globally, but there's not that much of a product that being able to provide them the right cover. So we say, hey, let's take a look at that. And when it comes to technology, I also would echo what Joanne was saying, that this is really a tool allowing you to then making the process, the user process, much easier and faster. And that goes back into the solving a problem, right? So we start with solving a problem. We also using the technology to then complete the loop of solving this problem. So I think the three are very much interrelated, but when you're initially building a business, maybe it's a little bit difficult to say which one comes first. But I would actually say identify a problem actually currently exists, and then being able to build upon that is probably, the most natural way.
What excited me most about learning about your business, Amanda, is that you saw a theme and a need and created the solution for it that wasn't maybe very obvious to anyone else. So you saw it. It was maybe your genius, right? That you recognized the opportunity and created the solution for it. And there was a demand that you were solving, an actual demand for something that didn't exist. What I see, some of the conversations we have on our side where we have new founders looking to become MGAs and they have an idea, sometimes it is not deeply rooted in foundational demand. So they've identified maybe a gap or a product that doesn't exist today, but it falls short of them being able to really defend that there's a demand or someone is actually going to be willing to pay money for it. And so bridging that gap of it, I call it the field of dreams. You can find something that doesn't exist and create a product, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be successful at launch. And so that strategy, and I think Amanda, the story of your business is so intriguing because it knits the demand, the opportunity, the product, the distribution masterfully.
Thank you. And no, I was also just saying that the demand itself, sometimes you can test it in tranches, because we tend to be perfectionist and thinking that, hey, if I want to build a product, this is my dream product, and let me just pitch that to the market, to the carrier, and then I can figure out the demand. But I think that in reality, actually building the other way around is probably more effective, because you know that there is a demand. But before you go out to build the entire thing, why don't you actually test the channel there already, right? With a maybe slightly simpler product, maybe something that rather than becoming an MGA straight away, be a broker, just adding like a layer of the product in there and see what is the channel and the conversion that you're actually getting. Is the problem really exist in this market? So, I mean, for example, even with us, we started as a broker, actually distributing a existing product first, just to testing that the validation tool we're talking about, these contractors needs insurance globally, but if they are actually just IT contractor in the UK, we actually can get them product. So why don't we actually do that first and then see what's the scale, what's the percentage of the people that need this kind of digital process? And I think that building this way really helps us also to move. Because what you don't want to do is say, hey, like I have this grand plan, but I'm not going to do anything until this whole thing is completed. And, while doing this in a so imperfect way, you're able to really gather the market feedback a lot faster. You're able to then tweak it. And then when you're actually building the product, you also know what are the feedback, you know the feature, not because you think that you know, but because your customer tells you to.
Absolutely. It sounds like, and I love you guys riffing. I think I'm taking away like entrepreneurship fundamentals almost from what you guys are saying. Like there's an MGA lens and an MGA product lens, right? To where we started. The end sort of comments you're making are entrepreneurship fundamentals. It feels like it's like, hey, if you want to start a business or you want to create any product, you have to think about the problem. You have to test whether the problem exists. You can't come in with a pie in the sky. Oh, I think the world needs this, but you have to kind of, validate through conversation or through the network you have, what the need might be and what the problem might be. And you also have to be a little bit flexible to how you deliver it. Is kind of what I was hearing. Maybe to flip into sort of the how I built this portion of this podcast. I mean, we have two, female founders here. I think one really cool, really, really, really impressed by both of you. I think I would love to learn, a bit more about that journey. Doesn't have to be sort of specific to the female founder part, but just the journey of honing in on your business, on sort of, how your background influenced, your journey to where you are today. Maybe Amanda, you start, and then Joanne, you follow on.
Sure. So I started my career as a banker. Actually, I was an investment banker. So I was in risk management in Deutsche Bank for 4 or 5 years, and then I moved on to M&A and corporate finance. And then I did a derivative pricing and structuring background. To be honest, the way that I actually fall into insurance is I would say that it's really as a pain point that I was solving in the market, right? But my first company actually has nothing to do with insurance. It was a talent marketplace to connect professional contractors with employers. And the reason I created that was because at the time, I was a contractor on the trading floor as a derivative pricer and structurer. And we found that there are so many, consultants because ever since the financial crisis, a lot of banking was actually hiring contractor consultants rather than the permanent employee as part of the program. And there's not really a marketplace to connect contractors with employers. And now, of course, you have LinkedIn and so on, it's very advanced. But at the time, probably about 15 years ago, there was not really that much option. So I created this marketplace to connecting professional contractor with jobs. Around 7-8 years ago, we built up to about 20,000 contractors. We sold it to AirSwift, which is one of the largest energy recruitment company, and they operate across, I think, about 35 or 40 different countries. And I was then brought in. One is as a part of the, of course, integration of our existing platform into AirSwift. And secondly, is really as their digital transformation director to looking into their entire process of the digitalization, from the candidate sourcing to onboarding. And this is where I actually got into the part of the insurance, because what we find is that they were validating contractors' insurance globally. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of contractors a year. And the admin team was just reading the insurance documents, right? So I thought, oh my God, this is actually really crazy. And this is the start of ChatGPT, by the way. That was literally probably about 5-6 years. Like ChatGPT is a really a hit thing, and everyone was talking about it. And then we thought, hold on a second, just for the insurance documents, why can't we actually put into? Honestly, at the beginning, it was just ChatGPT. say we can actually take a look at these documents and being able to read the documents and much more accurate than a person who, by the way, within this recruitment company who doesn't even understand the insurance that well. They're literally just ticking the boxes of like, okay, professional liability, fine, I saw it. General liability, I saw it, right? So what is the efficiency that we are able to gain from deploying this tool versus what's out there currently in the status quo? So it's been actually, we made it free of charge. Initially, we just say, hey, why don't you test out this tool? We can embed directly into your onboarding system. So you don't have to have like another system sitting on the side. And then that's kind of where the journey started, because we find that there's just so many contractors actually going through the process. So I suppose my background, it actually naturally converged into it because I had a lot of the experience initially as a banker. The derivative pricing and structuring later on has a lot of crossover, of course, with the insurance pricing and the insurance risk assessment. Then my first company really is kind of highlighted this problem, right? So I'm just I'm really passionate in solving problem, and I think that's the most fun part of being an entrepreneur.
It sounds like that's the common thread in your journey is you find problems and then you don't wait for somebody to go fix them. You think about how you can do that, which is really cool. Now, maybe pivoting to Joanne, I think, you have a really cool, interesting story of how you got to leading Sprouter. Would love to hear sort of the journey and, and sort of the story behind that.
No, I love it. So when I think back on my career and if I could distill it to themes or like kind of what leads you ultimately to start a business, everyone's story is certainly very personal and different. I am a person that learns by doing. I like the personal experience of having gone through the decision making and the trials and the errors and the mistakes. And I learn that way. And I've had the good fortune in my career to have opportunities to say yes to opportunities, even the ones that looked really bad, like the projects no one else wanted to take or do. I would say, like, I'll do it. I'm willing. I wasn't excited to do it. I'm willing to do it, knowing that I would learn something along the way. And one of those aha moments for me in my career that ultimately shows up here at Sprouter a lot is I was at a very large carrier and they were doing a policy admin system conversion project, moving from one platform to another and having to move 55 programs over to a new enterprise size policy admin system. The work what that looked like was it was terrible, right? It was very terrible. It was very difficult to break down and understand how it all worked and what needed to be built and in what order and what was necessary, what was happening in MGA's offices for real versus what the carriers thought was happening. So having to break all this down, the learnings from that of being able to bridge cross functions, of having a look in from an MGA's operating perspective, underwriting, product development, compliance, technology, and being able to bridge and see how all of these pieces, how all of these roles played together was immensely enriching for my professional development. And I'm grateful for that experience. It was a horrible experience, but it was it was essential for my growth and my learning. Fast forward, I have been a program manager on the carrier side. I've run product development teams at a carrier. I've built insurance programs and products at early day insurtechs from scratch. One of the opportunities that I had while I was at Hippo Insurance prior to starting Sprouter, my commercial lines product was going to be sunsetted so the company could focus on its core business. That summer for me, I was really in a position of thinking about what does my next move look like? Do I persist, where I am, or what does this look like for me now with what I have and what I can offer? I happened to be having some interview conversations that summer and with founders looking to build their leadership teams for their startups. And I had 4 identical conversations with these leaders, and they all said, what I'm looking for is a head of underwriting or insurance, someone that can help design the strategy, define the underwriting, build the insurance product, build the team, and then manage the function after we launch. And I had done all of those pieces in my career, and I had just finished that for Hippo. That was a wonderful experience, by the way. But I had 4 identical conversations. And so when I left within a couple weeks, when I reflected on those conversations, I didn't look at that as job opportunities. I looked at that as a business. I had 4 companies hungry to solve the same problem. So similar to Amanda's background, right? She saw an opportunity. She saw something that didn't exist and filled it. I saw it the same way. I saw that what was needed was this multidisciplinary cross-functional service to help solve accelerating founders, startups, MGAs getting into market, doing the pieces that are connected but disparate and putting that into an actual service. Now, I have tended to approach my life generally in the framework of what if it actually all works out? All right, like what if it works? So for me, from a risk
Optimism.
perspective, yeah, I mean, I'm willing to take a step forward into the dark. And I know humans can do hard things. And Sprouter by itself in concept did not exist. In like there are service providers out there providing some of the services that Sprouter provides. Yes, absolutely. But as a holistic, connected offering and this mechanism of being able to promote in a one conversation type of experience that you get here didn't exist. And so not everyone thought Sprouter was a good idea when I pitched this as a concept because there was no frame of reference. There was nothing to look at to say, oh, it's like this business. It was not like another business, but Sprouter existed. It became to exist because of a need. I felt it as an entrepreneur, as a sitting in an MGA, feeling like I was the most senior insurance person in my company. And I didn't have people, if I had questions, which we all do, who did I go to? Who was going to answer my question? It feels lonely being in that spot. Sprouter's the response to that. So being able to start something that was going to solve the same problems that I had as the customer felt like the least risky thing I could have done, frankly. And Sprouter's been a whole lot of fun.
I love it. I love watching both of you light up talking about your journey. It's like, you could tell that it's one of those bets you had to make, and surely it's gratifying to sort of see it continue to grow. To dive a little bit more into sort of that topic of growing and scaling, let's talk about aha moments and iteration, right? Let's talk about some of those moments in your journey. Amanda, for you as an MGA, and Joanne, for you at Sprouter. It's all great to start with that idea, that problem, right? And you feel really strong about the problem and maybe the initial product and the way you're going to do it. But let's talk a little bit about that mindset and those moments in which you have to adapt to survive or to thrive, right? Maybe Amanda, you can jump in on that one. Given some of the business that you've been doing.
Yeah, I also think that just also echoing what Joanne was saying in terms of the Sprouter at the time doesn't exist, right? So it's difficult for people to really conceptualize what's the business model, what does it really look like. We had a similar thing, and I think that some of the great product actually it was brought to market because it doesn't exist. Because otherwise, you're just doing the standard thing. But the challenge here, and get back to kind of your topic in terms of survival movement or thrive, is the people tend to try to categorize it because whether it's actually talking to a carrier investor and so on, they try to say, hey, what are you? I have to categorize you because otherwise I don't know who you are. It's kind of like you go into a house and, there's no renovation and so on, and you're kind of seeing just a whole bunch of mess. And a lot of the people, there are some people who's very intuitive and they may be able to see the vision anyway, but I would say that that's a very small percentage of people. And when you need to actually communicate this concept to everyone, because ultimately when you're building a business, you have to align everyone. You have to align your customers, you have to align your partner, you have to align the carrier. If you have investor, you also need to align the investors. This is where, I think that the superpower and also the challenge for the founder, especially when the product doesn't exist in the market, is one, how do you really explain it when it's just kind of idea in your mind, and actually bring the vision together and bring everyone together to actually be able to see the potential of that. The second part is the practicality. So just because of you want to build this product, how are you going to do about it? How are you going to execute? Because no one is going to tell you, because if you have an existing process, you can say, okay, we're doing A, B, C because of that's being done many times, right? But you have to really thinking creatively because of that hasn't been done. So how are you going to be able to define the exact process of them making this product available in the market and make it so simple for everyone else to see it and say, okay, fine, actually now I can see it. I'm going to follow Joanne, Amanda. So because of I believe in that, because that's very clear to me. So that's, I would say that the second challenge actually for us at the time, because of the insurance actually for international businesses and fully digital quote within 30 seconds. It just, it didn't exist before. So how is it possible? Then what's the underwriting looking like? What's the, the underwriting guideline look like? And how are you able to build into this digital process, so that it's not actually just manual underwriting and review, but being able to actually bind within 30 seconds, but still maintain your risk assessment and and then I think the third one is really about also building the comfort in the market, because you can have both the first two. But if people are not comfortable, this is the one thing about especially when we work with large companies, right? So if you go to speak to a large companies and they're not comfortable about it, even if they're excited, they're going to be like, hey, let's just hold on. Let's take a step back. And maybe we will do it. But we're going to come back to you in 6 months' time. And you don't want them to come back in 6 months' time because you don't have the 6
That's
months.
half your runway, maybe.
Exactly. So I think that, and I think for us, the challenge part really initially was being able to explain how are we going to really making this underwriting process work for 250 occupation and across all these countries, and enable them to quote for a PI insurance that has global jurisdiction, and how does this kind of algorithm engine really work at the back to allow us to actually assess the risk correctly and collect the right data to reflect that. So there's a lot of, the exciting part is talking about the solution. Hey, borderless insurance, it sounds really cool, but there's a lot of the details at the back. So I think the key really between someone who's kind of almost dreaming and then, couldn't get something off the ground or didn't follow through versus the company who actually successfully built the product, a lot of the time is actually the difference is whether they are able to convert a dream into concrete plan, and then also having the data and process to back this up.
Awesome. Joanne, let's hear a little bit about, your journey. It sounds like you said, people weren't all behind you at the beginning. Maybe you had some doubters, some haters. Tell us about the journey to iterate and become kind of what you guys have become.
Yeah, I think I love, you've heard this, right? It's like you could say, like, I dare you to doubt me. Right? Like, I mean, it's a little bit of that. I think bringing a little bit of an edge into that and having the confidence in your own abilities and your own vision. First of all, I mean, if you don't believe in yourself, no one else is going to, right? And so you've got to be your own backer, frankly. But I also firmly believe that while the problems that show up at Sprouter are my problems to solve, I don't need to be the one to create the answers or the path to solve the problem. I'm ultimately accountable, but my gosh, if we're not leaning on our network, our customers, the team that sits here to make this what it is, what are we doing? As a leader, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
So I often will start a hard problem with asking who can help me, who knows more about this than I do, who's been in a similar situation, um, and lean on my network. I have not always historically been good or effective at networking or working to improve or increase or contribute to my network. I'm much better at that right now. I like to be a contributor because I do feel like my experiences and my failures and my challenges have their tuition. That tuition is something that I can share and prevent someone else from walking into. Others are the same way. I want to learn from others. I think from a Sprouter specific perspective, there are trade-offs that have to be made all the time here. There are so many opportunities and so many problems that need to be solved in the industry in general, and to help support startups and MGAs get to where they want to go. I think part of it is just having the discipline of saying, okay, but not now, right? And staying focused on what your business is, and parking a lot the growing list of ideas that you could chase and incorporate. Strategically, I like to make sure that all of the decisions that get made here are additive to both Sprouter as well as our customers, that we're providing something that they want and need. And then two, don't create a competitive environment for our clients, right? Never create the thing that our clients are actively looking to solve, and never become a competitor to our clients. But at the end of the day, I mean, when this happens on a weekly basis, the challenges of having to figure out what the trade-offs are. For me, it has always been anchored around bringing the right stakeholders to the table and using the council in order to help inform the best outcome.
Amazing. So selfishly, I kind of want to bring it back to, we are on a Accelerant sponsored podcast here. Let's talk a little bit about how capacity plays. I know we talked about product, tech, distribution earlier. Tell me a little bit about how capacity plays into the ability to scale, right? How does the right partner accelerate your future or hinder your future, and what are those things that capacity means to you and does for you in terms of being an operator, or being an operator to your clients? Either one of you can jump in on that one.
I'll start because I think I know you'll have some really deep insights here. I think from my personal experience of having to secure my own capacity and work through renewals, as well as where I sit here from a Sprouter perspective, helping clients get it. When you have it, and I think what's particularly special about Accelerant is the removal of the distraction of the annual renewal. The pressure is removed with the longer term commitment for that capacity, removes that pressure from the operator to always feeling like they're having to go find the next capacity or getting ready for the next renewal. It takes your eye off the growth initiative and more on the defensive. Accelerant removes that for the founder. So I think that's extremely powerful in differentiating, to allow the founder do what founders do, what they're great at, is growing their business.
You're speaking of the 5-year commitment, our trademarked 5-year initial commitment.
Special.
So yeah, Amanda, I would love to hear from you, having to had shopped maybe your program and find the capacity, tell me about that experience, what it means to you. I think you might have a few insurers you work with, so, feel free to riff on any of that.
I think honestly, Accelerant has been extraordinary for us. If without the capacity and the backing of Accelerant, for the product that we really have the vision, we may be ending up with a much more limited version, which obviously would hinder our growth. So I just think that the Accelerant team has been extremely innovative, very forward thinking, and that's very rare, I think, within the insurance industry, because we have so many, probably the industry is very conservative, risk averse. A lot of the insurers try to say that they are trying to be innovative, right? So you see these innovation program and so on, but really it's about being able to follow through. And are you actually giving this kind of new product enough of the attention and the flexibility and the freedom to be able to really develop the entire program? And I think for us, we worked with other insurers in the past, not to name exactly, which ones, but we did find it very limited.
I'm joking.
So I think that they're trying to give you kind of like a low-hanging fruit in terms of, okay, maybe just try this out, but they're not going to allocate enough of the resource to really backing the idea. Why the process with Accelerant is really that, the team did a lot of due diligence of thinking and so on before they back us. However, once they back us, once they actually understand the product and they then say, hey, you guide, you lead the way. You tell us what type of product you want, and we give you the resource and we give you the guidance and so on to make this happen, right? And I think this is really, really special. And yeah, again, I'm very, very grateful to this partnership.
Well, that's great. That's great. I mean, one of the reasons I'm here, in my previous life, I was a crypto MGA, and you can imagine what that capacity sourcing process was like. But Accelerant was our US backer, which spoke a lot to their ability to think creatively and make bets and sort of, again, dive in with people trying new things. So that is something that that I appreciate about Accelerant, and now I'm here. Obviously,
Yeah.
I was won over by that, but yeah, that's something that certainly I appreciate hearing from others as well, and we'll clip that for the Accelerant testimonial board meetings and all that
Yeah,
in the
absolutely.
future.
I think it's also the speed. So, when we initially launched the program, I think with some other insurers, we tried 12 months or 18 months was just like a limited version of the product. While we actually started to work with Accelerant, we were able to get to the market within 3 months. And this is kind
Amazing.
of, across all the occupation that we are looking for, the features that, that is actually going to make the product unique. And, you know,
Yeah. I would just add, I mean, you talked about like this being an Accelerant commercial. It could easily become one, right? So what I
Hey, we're okay
appreciate
with
from
an Accelerant commercial. This is an Accelerant podcast. So we didn't pay anybody to say anything. I'll just put that out there.
that's right. This is not a paid seat here, but it is very easy having been on the carrier side. I am a carrier person by from a DNA perspective. It is very easy to get caught up in the things that don't actually move the needle from a risk perspective. But I think there's a balance to be had where I think Accelerant from its very earliest days has really committed to focusing on the things that matter, which I think also really helps the acceleration process with being able to onboard and back the commitments that they have with their members in ways that really, frankly, haven't really seen demonstrated in the market at large, despite the commentary around we want to move fast and be innovative. It's the action that you need to be paying attention to, right? Watch the behavior, not the words. And I think this is one where Accelerant in particular has been consistent with that from its earliest days.
Amazing to hear that, everybody. Accelerant's the place to be. How do you guys think? Okay, so to pivoting to, I think this is related to capacity and related to sort of that the commitment piece. Like, everyone's talking about the softening market now, right? We're entering a softening market. It's going to be more competitive, but you're not going to grow just because rates are growing. Carriers that were originally shy of certain areas are now coming back in. One, how are you thinking about operating in this softer market? And two, maybe how does the relationship you have with your capacity or with your customers influence your mindset kind of going into this changing market?
I think from our side, I probably just want to talk about our relationship now with brokers. Initially, the product itself was very much focused on the contractor market, and I think that maybe from a specific segment point of view, because of contractor business liability insurance typically has quite low loss ratio. So I would say that we are actually quite fortunate being able to have a very unique distribution channel for contractors, which is a low risk categories. I haven't really seen too much of a softening of the market, I would say, because ultimately these are small businesses and, you're just looking for volume. But the distribution play is the most important part. As we then, of course, move into the broker market, that obviously has, changed slightly. And of course, we are now looking into a much bigger ecosystem. So we then start to also using the same process in terms of the instant 30-second digital quote and buy system, algorithm-driven underwriting process for providing a full PI combined insurance for insurance brokers. So what that really means is that rather than just utilizing this for our direct distribution, we are able to give a Shopify for brokers kind of experience so that you can have your own logo, you can have your own digital quote and buy system, and then it's powered by our algorithm driven underwriting. So on that side, we do see maybe more capacity coming into the market. And I think that I'm probably speaking more on the UK side. Each country is slightly different. We operate in Europe too. Europe is not so softening because there's less competition down there. a lot of that's also very dominated by the local big insurers and the big brand. And Accelerant do operate within this market, but I would say that there's kind of less competition within that segment. In the UK, there's more capacity definitely pouring into the market, especially for certain line of business. But I think that ultimately it's not about we didn't want to be the cheapest, although we're a digital player, we don't want to be the cheapest. And we made it very, very clear from the beginning, that's not the intention, because otherwise you just race to the bottom. What really needs to, number one is that what are you actually adding to the market? So I think early on in our journey, we find that even when we distribute through insurance brokers, the USP we have is really about speed. So we take the equation out of the price competitive because of that's not going to be sustainable, right? Because if you're actually going to be cheaper than someone else, and that's not a good product USP, and then it's going to create you high loss ratio and so on. You really need to actually make sure that the underwriting process is solid, and it's not a longer term of a very I would say strategic move in the longer term profitability point of view for MGA. However, there are certain things that can be improved in the market, things like speed. So we saw that because of our technology are able to using algorithm to price insurance product, not just for I would say smaller businesses. Now we can bind any business up to 100 million turnover. But rather than using the traditional and kind of reviewing, underwriting, and getting back to them in a few days, we built an algorithm that being able to capture all this risk criteria and then utilizing also a lot of the third-party data analysis to then feed the price back in. And then being able to use analysis and AI to refine this algorithm as time goes. And then what we really deliver is speed, better customer experience, and also a much better tool for the brokers. And we make it free actually for brokers. So we don't actually charge. For example, Actuaries in the UK is I think everyone in the UK market know them because they are the biggest software for insurance brokers for E-Trade. They charge like £50,000 just for a digital quote advice system, right? While with us, with our product, with Accelerant, we are able to provide them this digital quote and buy Shopify eShop for insurance broker experience, like within 5 minutes, right? With your branding and everything. So if we're really thinking about how can we make the current process using this technology, the AI is the next wave. So within the company, we started looking into things like how do we really using AI, the development, the AI interface rather than the digital quote. So I think there's a lot of the elements. It's really about as a company or as a founder, where do you want to compete yourself? Is it just pricing, which is not really sustainable, or is it something else? And every company has different, of course, USP. Just what works for us, it might be different to another MGA. But I think that's kind of the million-dollar question that we trying to actually nail this at the beginning is going to be really helps.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what I'm taking away from what you just said is basically you don't peg your differentiation. If you're not pegging your differentiation on price, which a softer market might impact more, but you instead peg your differentiation on relationships and speed and technology, that helps you sort of, insulate yourself from sort of the broader market forces. Maybe to flip the question or to change the question a little bit for you, Joanne, it's what are you advising maybe GAs to think about in terms of, hey, maybe you're entering a soft market. I know obviously within the Accelerant ecosystem, it's a little more specialty products. Maybe it's a little more insulated just generally because it's specialty products, but are there things you're advising MGAs about entering a soft market? Are there concerns they're bringing to you?
Yeah, it's going to echo a lot of what Amanda is successfully doing in her business, candidly. So I think what actually worries me more about the early conversations I have with founders who are looking to become MGAs is they're not asking and they're not expressing concerns around the market itself and what a soft market means for how they need to think about structuring their strategy. So we do spend quite a bit of time making sure that the offering has differentiation, that pricing is never a differentiator, right? It's got to be something else. I think with the softening market in particular, one by its nature will increase competition for capacity. And capacity is in a really nice position to be very selective and choosy about who they offer their capacity to, frankly, and they're in a power position to be able to craft their portfolio that way. And so the way that we're preparing our clients is to help position that program when we're designing that program to be competitive and compelling and enduring. And this is really the time I think where you're going to see existing MGAs that maybe have been lucky in the hard market. It's easy to grow in a hard market. It's really difficult to grow or maintain in a soft market, but more importantly, deliver underwriting profitability to your capacity. And so we focus more on making sure that that story, the pro formas, the rate plan, the distribution angle all support delivering underwriting profitability to the carrier as the way to get through the door. And then the differentiation has to show up um, to take the final conversation to actual contract. I think from a Sprouter specific perspective, it forces us to think about we staffed in a way to help support the new demands that are coming at us because it's a softening market. Who do we need to have? Who do we need to be ready here to support the demands? And I'm expecting right now that there'll be a little bit more conversation around admitted products as opposed to non-admitted products for a go-to-market approach, which is expensive and risky. But what that also means is we need to have the right folks here within Sprouter to be able to navigate and just actually manage the work that's responsible, that comes from creating an admitted product, right? And filing and all that. But at the end of the day, core underwriting is core underwriting, and underwriting profitability is what matters, and hard or soft market. So I think the cream will rise to the top here.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, maybe to start wrapping things up, I want to maybe give you guys a chance to maybe going back to the beginning questions. What does it take to scale in 2026? If you had one sort of, 10, 15-second piece of advice for an incoming MGA or existing MGA about what that is based on your experience, it's kind of putting you on the spot, and I didn't prep you for this, but if you have one 2 or 3 sentence kind of piece of advice, what would that be? Whoever thinks of it first.
I think on the maybe I start with the what actually takes for a business to scale. It's the alignment or these elements that we just talked about, from distribution, the capacity, the key problem that you're solving in the market that has a big enough a pain point, not just a little bit better, but it's actually there is a very strong hook that something actually doesn't exist, and there's urgent need. I think urgency is also very important, as well as your network and of course, capital and everything. So I would say that the alignment of all these elements, which is not easy, right? But it doesn't really mean that all of these will come in, within the next 3 months or so on. And what we find is that it takes time for business to scale. And I think that a lot of people not a lot of people, but some people might, think about the entrepreneurship as a kind of like a one night success. And all of a sudden you kind of scale the company to, X $1 billion and so on, which happens sometimes, but there's a lot of prep work. There's a lot of journey before. There's a lot of things actually underneath the iceberg that people don't really see. And by the time you actually scale, it could be that you already tweaked it multiple times. You actually talk to different people multiple times. The technology itself takes time to build as well. But when they actually all align, that's the time that actually can really scale there. So I think for Jove, we are literally at this point. So I'm extremely excited about this year, also the coming year as well, because we literally kind of have all these elements all aligned. But it took us 4 years to get here, not 4 months. So I think in terms of advice to kind of, new MGA who wants to come into the market, actually will be partially aligned back to the statement in terms of the persistency. Insurance market doesn't move fast, right? Even I know Accelerant is exceptional, and they do move pretty fast, but still thinking about the idea, the underwriting model, the right product, it takes time. And I would say that persistency is really, really important for anyone who wants to come into this market, because it's not going to be like I'm building a SaaS tool, I'm building a, which is going to take me maybe 3 months to prototype and it's either work or not. If someone wants to start within this MGA market, I think that being able to have the persistency, test the market, and actually building a proper model and talking to a lot of the carriers, and the resilience is extremely important. I would actually say probably my biggest advice for new MGA is really about resilience and the persistency of building a product.
Mhm. I think I want to agree with all of that. I think ultimately the MGA needs to build to solve a demonstrated problem with committed distribution. Committed distribution being the underscore to this. You must have a way to commercialize your business early, because the cash flow drain of running any business is real. You need to be able to start selling. Those two problems, building to solve a real problem with committed distribution. Everything else is just tactics. You can create the underwriting to solve this. You can create the product to solve it. You can find the technology to support it. Everything else is just operational tactics. But those two critical pieces have to be true for anything else to work.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you to you guys for spending this time sort of sharing your insights. Hopefully for the audience, you got a lot of great tidbits out of this. I think we have two dynamic leaders here who are willing to sort of give you a peek behind the curtain of how they think about the market and their businesses. And again, that's the intent of sort of this podcast, is to be a learning and development sort of oriented but casual podcast, and hopefully people feel that. With that, thank you guys for joining the latest episode of Ecosystem Unfiltered, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks,
TJ.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Ecosystem Unfiltered, brought to you by Accelerant and hosted by me, TJ Alanalua. Tune in next time for more unfiltered conversations. See you soon.